Hello, thank you for tuning into this 2022 Election Candidate Forum for Legislative District 22, Position 1. This forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Thurston County in collaboration with Thurston Community Media. The League of Women Voters is proud to be a nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public to defend our democracy and empower voters. I am Darlene Hine from the League, and I will be moderating this forum. Shelley Knipe, also a League member, will be your timer. The candidates are Loretta Byrnes and Beth Doglio. For this forum, each candidate will have the opportunity to answer a series of questions. The first question will be to the candidate in alphabetical order, and then will be alternated so that each candidate has the chance to start first. You will also have the opportunity to ask your opponent a question. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. The timer will turn yellow to show when you have 15 seconds left, and then will show a stop sign when your time is up. If you don't notice the sign, I will tell you when your time is up. For the first question, I will begin with Loretta Byrnes. What makes you the better candidate for this position?
Okay, so my name is Loretta Byrnes. I'm running for state representative. Thank you for having me. I have a master's in natural resource economics, a bachelor's degree from Washington State University, and I spent 20 years overseas doing economic development in some of the poorest countries in the world, including 4 with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. As part of that process, I learned about government, policy analysis, and how to help people without creating dependency. And I feel I've also worked for Employment Security as a King County Workforce Area Director and as a labor market economist. And I feel like I am most qualified for this because we need to work on policies that actually make things better, not make things worse. We've passed policies in this state that have driven up the crime rate dramatically, that have actually increased the problem with the homelessness, and have actually increased the cost of housing due to climate policies and other issues. And I feel like we need to make those things better. Thank you.
Yes?
Great. Well, thank you for holding this forum. It's an honor to be here. Well, first of all, I come into the position with 4 years of experience as your state legislator from 2017 to 2021, so I can hit the ground running. I am deeply embedded in this community, having raised both of my boys here and been a very engaged PTA president at Roosevelt Elementary, but have worked on issues like parks, arts, recreation, and culture. I'm the chair of the Park Foundation Board. I'm also on the YMCA board, as well as Quixote Communities, which provides tiny houses for those who find themselves homeless. I am also, in my professional life, have really focused on housing and climate, and those are 2 of the most significant issues that the legislature will be dealing with in the upcoming sessions, and I bring a ton of expertise to those issue areas.
For the second question, I will begin with Beth Doglio. The second question, is there anything you think the state should do to address the homelessness crisis?
Well, absolutely, and I have actually passed policies that actually are making the situation better. First of all, I passed a bill that allows a councilmanic vote on a 0.1% sales tax, and that's creating over $31 million across the state to provide housing, to build housing, and provide permanent supportive services to them across the state. I also passed a bill because it's not just about putting money into the situation. It's making it easier to build those low-income units. It's reducing administrative costs for those who are providing the services, and I passed a bill that did both of those things. So I feel like I also this past session worked on the Apple Homes and Health bill, which is going to make housing much more of a healthcare priority and allow us to use Medicaid dollars to treat housing as a healthcare issue.
I lost myself. Where are we? Oh, here. I'm sorry. Loretta?
Well, I think that that we need to look at what kind of policies have been passed that are actually increasing the problem with homelessness. Homelessness has been on the decline in the United States over the last 20 years, and yet Washington State still has one of the highest rates of homelessness. And the data shows from many county programs that most people that are homeless have mental health and substance abuse issues. And the fact that the state passed, basically decriminalized the possession of heroin, fentanyl, and meth has not helped with the situation with the homeless. And we have a great deal of homelessness in Olympia, and one of the issues is it's not just about what the state does, it's also about what the counties do and what the cities do. And we need to incentivize people to get help and to get on the path to recovery. And we can't do that if we do not enforce the law when people are vandalizing and breaking into to businesses and shoplifting. And so we need to look at the policies which are actually creating this problem first.
For the third question, I will begin with Loretta Byrnes. What do you think is the most important issue statewide that the legislature should be addressing?
Education. We're spending half of our state budget on education. We spend $18,000 a year per student. More than half of our property taxes go to education, and yet less than half of the children can read, write, and do math at grade level. I have a blended family of 8 adult children, so I'm very familiar with our educational system. I spent 3 years going to 90% of the board meetings, and we are passing policies that are making it more and more difficult for teachers to teach in this state and to focus on academics. It's the most important thing we do as a society. It's in our Constitution, and we have to fix it. And that doesn't mean just throwing more money at it. We need to listen to teachers about the policies that are making it more and more difficult for them to teach. And I've knocked on 8,000 doors in this community in all 3 school districts. Teachers and parents are frustrated with what we're doing in our educational system.
Beth?
Well, I hark back to housing. That's what I hear at the doors, having also knocked on a number of doors in this community. And I do believe that we need to have more mental health and chemical dependency supports for those who are on the streets. But it's also important that we be investing in middle housing and making sure that we have zoning laws that allow us to use existing infrastructure so that we can increase our housing stock, which should bring down the price, the cost of rent across the board. The more it's economics 101, you have more housing, the supply and demand, and so that should bring it down. But we need to make sure and have displacement policies within that as well. So. And we've just got to build more units to bring the folks off the streets that are currently experiencing chemical dependency and mental health issues.
The fourth question first goes to Beth Doglio. I did it, sorry, it's Doglio. Please describe whether there is state legislation you should support regarding reproductive choice and why.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I am 100% pro-choice and believe that anyone should have access to full reproductive health care as well as gender-affirming care. I have been endorsed by Pro-Choice Washington and in fact worked for them in the 90s, so have been a long-time advocate of making sure that we have access to full reproductive health care. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that that maintains in Washington State. We've had a voter initiative. The state overwhelmingly supports that. We need to make sure it's in our Constitution. We need to make sure that our religious health care operations like Providence, about 50% of our health care is provided by religious institutions, and we need to make sure that residents at those facilities have access to abortion care, at least outside the system of their residency training, because that is going to be important. And we want to make sure that any kind of influx that we're experiencing from other states is also accounted for and supported.
Thank you. Loretta?
Can you repeat the question again?
Certainly. Please describe whether there is state legislation you would support regarding reproductive choice and why.
Well, I think right now, I mean, abortion has been legal in Washington State since 1970, before Roe versus Wade. It was allowed up to 4 months of pregnancy. And then we passed the initiative in the 90s that it allowed abortion up to viability without extreme measures, which basically means up to 8 months. So, and despite the fact that that was passed with only barely 50% of the vote, there's really been no effort to make abortion illegal. So it's not really an issue for me, and I don't think it's really an issue for this state. At the same time, I am concerned. The issue with Roe versus Wade was to get government out of that decision-making process for women. But in our state, what concerns me is that we are making it so people have to participate in providing abortions, like pharmacists who now have to provide those pills, even though they don't believe in abortion. So I think we have to acknowledge both views on abortion.
The fifth question goes to Loretta Byrnes. A major carbon pricing bill passed the legislature in 2021 called the Climate Commitment Act. Please tell us your understanding of how it works and whether you think the legislation was a good idea.
Wow. Okay. My impression is that's a very long document and a very long act, and it involves on the one hand, trying to reduce carbon emissions in Washington State, even though we have some of the lowest rate of carbon emissions in the country. And right now we're actually only one of 3 states that complies with the 2018 Energy Code. I believe that Climate Act was actually based on using more natural gas because we phased out the use of coal for energy. But now what they're also trying to do is get rid of natural gas in our state, which is a very clean source of energy. And if right now they've allowed the unelected building codes of council to do away with natural gas in commercial buildings, and they want to do the same thing with homes. And yet our state has no plans for how they're going to replace that source of electricity, and the fact that it's going to make our power grid more vulnerable when we have severe weather outages like we do usually in November.
Beth?
Well, the Climate Commitment Act is currently in rulemaking, and the first auction is expected at the end of February. So the state will be auctioning off basically credits that allow greenhouse gas intensive and covered industries to basically pollute. So you have to pay to pollute, and ultimately those credits will go down over time so that we are reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that we are allowing industry to put into the air. And with that comes the responsibility of the legislature to actually invest those dollars that come from that auction into carbon reducing mechanisms, like moving gas out of people's homes, because it is not only a greenhouse gas emitter, but it's also a health impact in people's homes, like moving people to and incentivizing the use of electric cars, as well as investing in industries to reduce their emissions as well.
The sixth question is for Beth Doglio. Are there any other issues or matters you would like to bring to the attention of voters?
Well, I think gun responsibility, clearly we've seen a new swath of kids getting killed because we are not doing a good job with gun responsibility in our country. I really want to see us ban assault weapons. I believe that there is a majority of people in this state who agree with that. I want to make sure that we're doing as much as we possibly can to get guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to either themselves or to others. I want to invest in the root cause of that, and that is mental health and good education, but being able to use our educational system to really identify kids who are having issues at school and are acting out that may lead to the unfortunate thing of them bringing a gun to school and using it to kill their classmates. We've really got to get a handle on this in our country. It's time.
Loretta?
Well, there's so many issues I'd like people to have a better understanding of, but I think in response to that, it's interesting that there's this focus on school shootings, but one of the biggest risks to our children these days is actually suicide and depression, and that's getting worse. And I think one of the reasons it's getting worse is that the message that's getting out there is that we're at the abyss, and that where our country is full of racism and negativity, and we're all about to drown due to climate change. And I worked with homeless kids at risk of homelessness before, and I was talking with one really smart young man, and I said, well, are you going to go to college? And he's like, well, what's the point? You know, things are so bad now. You know, and I told him, I said, you only know what you only know. You're only 18 years old, and things have actually gotten so much better in this country. And I'm really concerned about what our children are being taught in our schools and what's being promoted through social media that's creating this depression and increasing the suicide rate among young people.
Thank you. The final question is, you each now have an opportunity to ask each other a question. You have 30 seconds to ask the question, and your opponent will have 1 minute to respond. Loretta Byrnes, you have the first question do you have a question for Beth?
I do have a question.
Okay.
So it was pretty easy to defund the police over the last few years, to destroy police morale by attacking them, and to not enforce the law, and to drive good police officers away with the vaccine mandate. So I'm wondering what you're going to do to actually address that situation. We have the lowest per capita rate of police officers in this country, and they've been leaving in the droves. And we now have one of the highest murder rates since the 80s, and crime has gone up dramatically. So what is your solution to these problems?
Well, I think that the people have spoken, and that there is a real strong desire of people to have a police system that was really community-oriented and community-centered. It's about community policing. And so I think the track that we're on, the Olympia City Council is doing a lot of work on reimagining public safety. The Lacey and the county have been investing in hiring mental health folks to actually show up at doors where it's a mental health crisis, not necessarily a crime. And we are actually not defunding, but we're investing additional dollars into our police system and making sure that they have the kind of training that allows for de-escalating situations, using less harsh responses, whether that, with someone on the street. And so I want to see us continue to invest in those kinds of solutions and really have a police system that is community-based.
Okay. Beth?
Yes.
Do you have a question for Loretta Byrnes?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court has left it up to the states to determine, whether or not women are going to have access to abortion. So I'm wondering if you would, I know that it's clear in Washington State that we are likely to undo that here, but I'm just wondering if there were the political opportunity that arose to vote for a statewide ban on abortion, if you would vote for that.
No.
Okay. Thank you, Loretta Byrnes and Beth Doglio, for participating in this forum. We thank TC Media for producing it. Expect to receive your ballot in mid-October. Your ballot must be mailed or placed in a drop box by 8 p.m. on November 8th. You can register to vote online through October 31st at vote.wa.gov. and in person until 8 p.m. at the Thurston County Auditor's Office through November 8th. We are encouraging our viewers to be a voter in the general election.